Hello fifth graders, and welcome to another video science test review. Today we are going to be talking about severe weather. Now there's different types of severe weather. There are storm surges, monsoons, thunderstorms, tornadoes or hurricanes, and there are also, did I forget one, drought. Okay. First of all, let's talk about how thunderstorms are created. Okay? This right here is a map of the United States. And in the middle of the United States, you have these massive air masses. Now, these air masses cover a large distance, and they have the same kind of temperature and moisture. So this cold mass and this warm mass, they come together and they meet. Where they meet is an area called a front. A front is the boundary where air masses with different temperature and moisture come together. So obviously a cold and a warm air mass are going to have different temperatures and moisture levels. And they come together at this front. Now this is kind of a close-up view of what's happening at this front. You can see the star goes with the star. This is what's happening. The cold air comes down. The reason the cold air comes down is because it is much more dense. It is more cramped than the warm air. So the gravity is going to pull this dense air down because it is heavier. There are more air molecules in this cold air mass. The warm air is going to get pushed up by the cold air like a ramp. Once the warm air goes up high into the atmosphere, the higher you go into the atmosphere, the colder it gets. So this warm air gets ramped up by the cold air, and the higher that warm air goes, it starts to condense because it's getting up into the cold atmosphere. So once this warm air starts to condense, it turns into clouds. Now that warm air is trying to now hold up these dense, heavy clouds. After a while, the warm air can't hold up those dense clouds anymore, and rain starts to happen. Thunder starts to happen. Now we're going to talk about thunder a little bit later in our physical science section when we start talking about electricity. But just know that these thunderstorms are characterized by huge clouds, rain, and lightning, and they are often formed or started in the middle of these fronts because once again the cold air is going down and the warm air gets ramped up. As that warm air gets ramped up high into the cold atmosphere, the warm air starts to condense. The warm air can't hold up those heavy condensed clouds anymore, and so rain starts to come down in the form of precipitation. All that to say, usually thunderstorms are created or formed right where there are fronts where cold and warm air masses come together. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how tornadoes are started. Basically, a tornado is started around a low pressure closure. Now, warm air is low pressure because those air molecules have a lot of room. There's no pressure. They're relaxing. They have a lot of room. The cold air is high pressure because everybody is squeezed and pressed together. There is not a lot of room to move around. So you have this high pressure surrounding this low pressure closure. All of these cold guys that are cramped want to run in to the low pressure closure. Why? Because as we talked about before, everything in nature wants to be balanced. Nature does not want too much in any given area. So these cold guys are like, hey, it's not fair. Let's go over to where those low pressure guys are hanging out because they have all this empty space. There's no pressure for them. So all these, the cold guys go rushing in. You can see that in step number 2 here. The warm air now is starting to get pushed up by this warm air. Okay, just the same thing that's going on here is the same thing that's kind of going on here. The cold air rushes in and goes down, and the warm air gets pushed up. When you have this warm air that's rising, it turns into a thunderhead. Okay, let's look at step number 3. The warm air gets pushed higher now, even faster. The cold air is rushing in even faster. You can see the low pressure closure is kind of creating this little middle chamber. Same thing that we have up here as that warm air rises and condenses into the cold atmosphere. Clouds and rain start to form. Finally, in step number 4, as that cold air is rushing in, it all rushes in and starts to spin around this low pressure closure. As soon as this funnel cloud touches ground, you officially have a tornado or a cyclone. A tornado, as we talked about before, starts around a low pressure closure, and it is a rotating funnel shaped cloud. Hurricanes start much the same way, but they are a lot more massive. Hurricanes have winds that are greater than 75 miles an hour, and the same thing, they're large swirling air around the low pressure closure. Same thing that we looked at here in step number 1. So hurricanes and tornadoes have a lot in common. Okay, we talked about thunderstorms, we talked about tornadoes and how they start here. We talked about hurricanes. Drought is basically when there hasn't been rain in an area for an extremely long time. It can get pretty dangerous, right? There's no water for any of the creatures or plants to live off of, so it can be extremely dangerous. So you can see that there, no rain for a really long time. Another type of severe weather are these storm surges that are created. Now basically what happens is, this is kind of a top view and this is a side view. The top view is this huge tornado that's spinning around. This side view here, because this tornado is spinning around and pushing into the water, it kind of creates this little upside down, or it creates this bowl or this bulge. Okay, so this tornado, because the winds are pushing down on the water so much as it spins, it kind of creates these waves. Now these waves then, this bulge, gets pushed towards shore, and that water then comes slamming up to the coastline. It goes over bridges, it slams over like coastlines, and it can do some pretty damaging flooding. Okay, so those are the storm surges. You can see the water rushing towards the coast because of the waves that are created. Lastly, we are going to be talking about monsoons. Monsoons are these seasonal storms that happen in places like Asia where it just rains a really long time. These monsoons typically happen the same time every year. But it's not like your rain that we have here in Southern California where it may be rain for a day or two. These monsoons are heavy downpour and they happen for a long time. One other severe storm that is not on here, that I really should have put it on here, is fog. Now fog, it has to be really thick. I believe it's so thick that you can't see past 1/4 of a mile. So once you can't see past 1/4 of a mile, it officially becomes severe weather. The fog is so thick that when you're driving, you have to stop because you can't see where you're going. Okay, well this is severe weather. I hope you guys learned a lot here in this test review. We've done a lot of study jams. We've done a lot of YouTube videos. You guys are ready for the test. Feel free to contact me on Facebook or Edmodo if you have any questions. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you guys in class.